everybody, this is the Wikstrand. So the year was 2008, and by this point I had basically stopped caring what Jim Carrey did. I didn't really like his movies, and he had gone stale and he had gone uninteresting, you could say. But I was kind of curious of Yes Man that came out 2008. And I thought that the concept was interesting, and it reminded me a little bit about a movie that came out a decade earlier, which I absolutely loved. Liar Liar. The question is, would he regain his status as one of the world's funniest comedians, and would this be a top of the year candidate when it comes to comedy? No on both questions, but I think that this is a warm, kind, nice and somewhat life-affirming movie, but it has its problems. Let's find out what those are and what Yes Man is about. This is Yes Man. So Carl, played by Jim Carrey, well, he works in a bank and doesn't have an optimistic view of life. His job is basically just to turn down people who ask for loans and stuff like that, and that doesn't make him happy. It doesn't make him happier of the fact that, you know, he has gone through a divorce, and he basically also tries to hide from, you know, his friends who wants to help him and stuff like that, but he just want to be on his own and is a bitter man. After having a nightmare in which he envisions himself dead and nobody seems to be that bothered about, you know, his demise, he has a bit of a life crisis, and he meets a colleague who says that, you know, he made a change in his attitude towards life and it has helped him becoming a better person. So he goes to this self-help kind of seminar led by this guru played by Terrence Stamp. Now, Carrey doesn't really believe in his, optimism bullshit and says this is phony baloney. And Stamp then says to him in a slightly threatening way that you are going to have to say yes to everything. If you don't do that, if you say no to a single thing, you will start having so much unluck and dissatisfaction that you might actually die. Now, Jim Carrey, of course, did not believe this at first, but then signs starts to appear to suggest that maybe Terrence Stamp is correct. So he starts to say yes to everything. And this causes his life to be a complete chaotic series of events. But in this chaos, he also meets Allison, played by Zooey Deschanel, who, starts to hang out with him and really like him because, she thinks that he is a free spirit and he just do things and accepts everything and have such a positive view of life. And sometimes Carrey has to do stuff that he doesn't want to do, but he has to say yes to anyway, which also begs the question, does Carrey at this point actually have a will of his own, or has he become a slave under this thing? How will this life turn out for him? What happens if he actually says no to something and actually sticks to it? And is the relationship going to be able to survive this cavalcade of chaos that is unfolding? That's what we're gonna find out. By the way, what happened to his Iranian wife? Did he ever have a chance to boink her, or she was just, dropped for some reason? Did he forget about her? I don't know. Anyway, so this is a warm, friendly, and very nice movie, and there are sequences in this movie that is so funny. The bar sequences, with the fight that ensues is absolutely hilarious. And Deschanel and Carrey has decent enough chemistry to make this thing work, and I always loved Zooey Deschanel, so that is a huge plus. Get away from me, you ducks. But there is also a problem here. This movie is a bit too long for its own good. And the further we got into the story, the more this turned into a formulaic romantic comedy with all the tropes that comes with the territories. They didn't miss a single thing when it comes to the cliches that we all know and I don't like. But it is a funny movie, but there is a ceiling to it. there is a ceiling that it cannot get across. At one point you realize this is about as funny as it's going to get. It's not going to be funnier than this. But it is a movie that is a bit inspirational, and as I said, it's nice and you feel happy after having seen it. It's based very loosely on a British book that came out a few years before this about a guy who tried something similar. But as I said, it's probably very, very loosely based on that concept. By the way, this is the kind of concept I really like when it comes to comedies. When a character must do or cannot do something that is very mundane, which shows the importance of said mundane thing. Liar, liar, Jim Carrey cannot lie. Fantastic movie with a slightly dodgy third act, but that's a story for another time. 1,000 Words, where Eddie Murphy has a limited number of words he can say before he dies. It was a great concept. It was not a good movie, but that is also a story for another time. This movie comes somewhere in between, I would say. There are problems, but it is also, as I said, a nice movie that you can watch, but you don't have to re-watch it. It's with some margin, I think, the funniest movie Jim Carrey has done since, 2001 or 2002 or something like that. But it cannot hold a candle to the fantastic movies he did in the 90s, The Mask, Dumb and Dumber, and Ace Ventura included. So, should you see this movie? Yes, I think you should see it. It is a nice comedy with a pretty okay pace, a bit too long for its own good, and a bit too many of the romantic comedy tropes. But on the whole, it was a pretty solid movie that had a nice look to itself, and Jim Carrey seems to enjoy himself a lot in this movie, and yeah, it was totally a good movie, but nothing to write home about, and not a movie that will go into the annals and history as one of the greatest comedies of all time. But for what it was, I think it was pretty good. Yes Man gets 62 points. This is a good comedy with a bunch of good jokes and a story that is interesting and has a concept that I thought was very funny, but not used to the extent that they could have done it. And I also think this movie should have been in hard R, so you could have really gone into the really, really messed up bits that they could have done, but they didn't do. Maybe that is the glass ceiling thing that this movie has, but it is a good movie, and as I said, it's probably the best movie that Jim Carrey has done since the turn of the millennium, except for me, myself, and Irene. So see you next time for Well So and So reviewing, well, such and such. Thank you for watching. Thank you very much.